So how could it be that banking used to be so goddamn regulated? If there is something even more inspirational than divine inspiration from ancient religious scriptures, then it's being up to your neck in shit. Suddenly abstract ideas will fit perfectly into pragmatic solutions. The famous principles of Glass-Steagall and similar regulations were formulated precisely because governments were drowning in shit caused by the consequences of financial speculation done by bankers. In the autumn of 1929, stock exchanges around the world crashed.
The tremendous crowds which you see gathered outside the stock exchange are due to the greatest crash in the history of the New York Stock Exchange.
The years leading up to these crashes were characterized by speculative gambling behavior by banks in most of the world. The banks speculated way too much of the money that customers had trusted them on stocks. Many banks also told the public that the stock market would continue to rise forever. With that message, the behavior spread to the rest of the population like a virus. The gullible public therefore borrowed lots of money from the banks and gambled on stocks for the borrowed money, so prices could rise even further. They often did so with the house or life savings as collateral.
Had amassed their fortunes buying and selling stocks, pieces of paper. The public was fascinated. Bankers, brokers, and speculators had become celebrities, and they lived like royalty.
As a result, the values of stocks skyrocketed. From the mid-1920s until 1929, the Dow Jones Industrial Average increased by almost 400%. In hindsight, it is of course naive to think that people can keep throwing their life savings in the stock market and banks can keep throwing their customers' money into this black hole of speculation. At some point, the stock market will run out of new money to push up prices. At some point, the difference between how much money that flows into the stock market and the money earned in the real world by people going to work or running the businesses will simply be too extreme.
This is the nature of mass illusion. Prices were going up, people bought, that forced prices up further, that brought in more people, and eventually the process becomes self-perpetuating. Every increase brings in more people convinced of their God-given right to get rich.
In the US, the stock market lost around 90% of its value over the following 2-3 years, and approximately half of the country's banks went bust. It was not just due to stock losses and loans that were not repaid. The population did simply not dare to trust many banks with the money anymore and took out the money in chaotic bank runs.
And bank after bank across the country is hit by panic withdrawals. New lines appear on American streets, depositors swarming to snatch out what savings they have left before it's too late. Banks by the hundreds, by the thousands are forced to close.
The crash in the financial sector then spread to the rest of the economy, as the banks didn't have much money to lend out to businesses and many investors were too broke or too nervous to invest in new businesses. Global GDP fell by almost 30% from 1929 to 1939, and most advanced economies experienced more than 20% unemployment. As a result, new banking laws were put together in most of the world that function roughly as outlined in the former chapter. In these laws, a high wall was built between investment banks, which speculate on financial markets such as stock market, and banks more connected to the real economy that give out loans to companies and where we have our savings. The problem is just that a newly signed law doesn't make the problem disappear right away. It takes time before a law takes effect and time before confidence in the banks and politicians is restored. While you wait for these laws to take effect, you might get pretty damn angry at the banks. If you had lost your money, you probably feel manipulated. If you were too poor or too sensible to gamble in Wall Street casinos and now unemployed or forced to take a pay cut, you'd probably be pretty angry too.
Many are beyond joking. A report from Detroit says men are sitting in the parks all day long, out of work, muttering to themselves.
This anger that you share with millions of people in economies depressed by high unemployment and extreme poverty is the perfect setting for fanatical demagogues. They can use all that anger as a vehicle to fulfill their ideological mission. Several prominent bankers were, for instance, Jewish, so here was even more fuel to Hitler's insane anti-Semitic propaganda and overall the perfect storm for the greatest psychopath of history.
Worldwide depression that followed hit Germany hardest of all. With some satisfaction, Hitler realized his day had come.
Mussolini, already a skeptic of capitalism, at least in rhetoric, blamed what he described as supercapitalism for the crisis. He could use the many stock market crashes to further establish and justify economic nationalism and cultural Spartanism, two pillars of fascism. Japan was highly dependent on international import of goods, and the trade wars that started as a result of the economic crisis gave the Japanese elite the perfect justification to expand their empire and win back what they had lost in trade with bullets and ultra-nationalist ideology.
This changed with the onset of the Great Depression in 1929. Japan, with very limited resources, was devastated by the Great Depression.
Approximately 10 years later, after the stock market crash, we get the Second World War, perhaps the darkest chapter in the history of mankind. And it's Germany, Italy, and Japan that are the neutral aggressors. In this context, where we discuss the financial sector's negative influence, we may need to add a fourth aggressor. The Swiss banks support Nazi Germany to such an extent that some historians count Switzerland as one of the allies and not as a neutral state.
The Nazis needed Switzerland. So what did they need it for? They needed it for its banks.
With the lessons learned about what the greed and irresponsibility of banks can lead to, the mentality for many years was simply never again. Why risk an economic collapse of the world economy and outbreaks of brutal wars so that bankers could gamble widely for the money we have in our bank accounts?